The 15-Point Plan is part of the Win, Make, Give podcast network.
And welcome back to another episode of the 15-Point Plan podcast. My name is Ryan Greigg, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jacqueline Smith. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited for this podcast. I'm extra excited because we have a special guest with us. And as always, the 15-Point Plan is here for you to increase your energy and reduce your stress. And one of the points on that 15-Point Plan is mindfulness. And this is a subject that we've spent a fair amount of time talking about. But today, we're really talking about mindfulness and not just the time that you take for yourself through your meditation or your prayers, but also spending some time grounding yourself, spending some time centering yourself through a specific practice that we call breathwork. So 15-Point Plan podcast listeners, I would like to welcome to the show a special guest by the name of Louie Hamner, who today is going to talk with us about breathwork. So Louie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
It's great to have you here with us today. I know Jacqueline actually participated in one of your breathwork sessions not too long ago, so I'm really excited to hear about that with her. But why don't we start, Louie, with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came across breathwork, maybe how long ago it was, how you came across breathwork, and what it's done for your life.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. You asking that question, I kind of look at it. I've looked at it differently just by you asking this question today. So I've never really thought about this, my transition or the context of breathwork and how it came into my life. But so I've been a business owner for 20 years, and I've gone through very stressful situations. In fact, one year, for about 18 or 19 months, I went through a depression, like full-on depression. It was awful. And I remember my wife telling me to go to this chiropractor that she goes to, and she kind of says, he kind of is more than just a chiropractor. He's like, he understands your energy. Like, she's like, you kind of need to go to him. And so I went, and he did this red light therapy. So he had all these, gadgets and stuff. And I remember laying on the bed there, and he did this red light therapy. And I get emotional talking about this because I've just remembered this today. But I remember feeling so peaceful. All of a sudden, I just felt all this peace. And I remember like crying to where the tears were like going into my ears. And I couldn't hear what he was saying because it was just like, because I just felt so relieved. And he kept saying, yes, like, good, just let go. And I'm like, what in the world is happening? And I could, like I said, I could hardly hear him because it was like I had to keep on, getting the tears out of my ears. Anyway, and then my wife started reading this book called Mindfulness, Finding Peace in a Chaotic World, or something like that. And at the end of this audio book had all these mindfulness sessions that were like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, or whatever. And those things really helped me and were very intriguing to me. And it was very shocking, like how powerful those little meditations were. Anyway, that context, I've never really associated all of that with breathwork, because what I realized is that breathwork was something that was coming into my life in a form that I didn't understand it. That makes sense? Like, like one day someone's talking about something and they use a word, and then you're like, oh my gosh, that guy said that 5 years ago. He talked about this. And then you remember all the other times that someone brought up that word or that concept. You're like,
finally clicks,
I did this 8 years ago. Where was I 8 years ago? I had it right here, and then I missed it, So anyway, so all of that context, and I remember going to Dr. Allen there in Draper, like it really, that was very helpful for me in like overcoming this depression, like letting go of this stress that I was holding on to. Fast forward a couple years later, a good friend of mine, Spring Benson, she just said, hey, we were talking one day, and I was going through kind of a hard moment in my life. And she said, hey, there's this guy that comes from Sedona to Utah every, couple times a year, and he does breath work. And I'm like, And all I knew breathwork was I had gone to Tony Robbins, and he does this priming exercise where you do that. And that's how I understood breathwork, was breathing out through your nose and, all this stuff. Anyway, and I just said, I don't know if I'll go. And she's like, you really got to go. It was incredible. So I went. So I went not really understanding it, not fully making the connection between that and mindfulness. Just thought, I don't know, Spring said to do it. Like Spring kind of knows stuff, like, and I'm going to go do it. And so we went and did it. We went to this, and it was 2 hours long. And I remember asking Spring, what do I do for 2 hours? And she's like,
Right.
just go. She's like, anyway. So I went, and it was crazy. I've never, up to this moment, I've never like put these two moments together, but laying on that bed with Dr. Allen and crying and just thinking, what is happening to me? Like, I am crying, like tears just, this guy's like a magical or something, like a wizard or something. I don't know what's happening. And then being in that breathwork practice, we're symmetrical, we're very complementary. We're like, if you juxtapose them together, you would go, oh yeah, they're the same thing. They don't look like the same. One was at a doctor's office, one's at a yoga studio, one's, they don't seem like the same, but they're very much identical things. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and that experience was very powerful for me. I cried during that practice. I got in the car and my wife says, what happened for you? And I just started crying. I couldn't even talk. It was like a little kid. You're going, I'm like trying to catch my breath and trying to tell her what happened. And I just said, and then literally like 2 minutes, 3 minutes later for me, I kind of caught my breath and I just said, man, this was awesome for me. And she's like, well, like what happened? I said, I feel like I talked to God for, 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I just bawled like a little kid. And I just thought, how was it? What? And I couldn't even understand it. Kind of like I couldn't understand what was happening with Dr. Allen laying on that bed. Like, what is happening? What is he doing to me? And so that's where it like began for me. That was like, and I remember my wife doing all this meditation before. I'm like, I'm not doing that. She's like, this mindfulness. And I'm like, mindfulness, go run a mile or go run, because I was running marathons at the time.
Sure.
I'm like, no, go run for an hour. You'll feel great. But laying on the bed, thinking about something like, what are you talking about? Like, that didn't make sense.
So Louie, let me break down a little bit what you're saying here, because I have an idea, but I want to make sure our listeners do as well. You mentioned, you used that word depression twice. You said you were in business for a couple of decades and hard times were happening. And then you mentioned getting depressed later. And it was that moment of somebody sent you to this place. And you talked about the red light therapy and you talked about the tears. And I've gone through breathwork and I've had those tears come out. But I want to make sure our listeners know physically what you were doing during that time. So like, what was the breath work? What were you doing that was causing those tears to come out? I'm imagining there was some heavy breathing going on, but what actually was physically happening in that moment?
Yeah. So in that moment, like in that practice for that style, because what I've come to understand today that I didn't understand then is that there's all these different styles of breath work. I don't even know if there's a number I can put to it, 50 or 100. I don't know. But there's all these different variations of breathing. And in this practice, this practice it's a forced inhale at the pace of a relaxed exhale. And then you just let the breath fall out, and it's a cyclical, it's like a water wheel. There's no hesitation at the top or the bottom. You're not counting to 5 or, counting and holding and then counting to 5. Or it's just all through the mouth, and it's you inhale, exhale, and it's just a constant. You're either inhaling or exhaling. And you're not trying to go to the tippy top of your lungs, and you're not trying to push it all out. It's just like the reason why you're lying down. You're lying down when you do this so that gravity kind of helps and letting and the belly, like just letting the breath fall out. So as soon as it falls out, then you're just inhaling again. It falls out, then you're inhaling again. And you're doing that for like 35 minutes.
Yeah. And it sounds, I don't know what our listeners are thinking right now, but it sounds, Louie, like, okay, I'm just breathing. It sounds so simple. And again, but I've been through this. And the benefits and what starts to happen is incredible. So tell us like what starts to happen in that 30 minutes. And then I want to hear about Jacqueline's experience with your class.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what's happening physiologically, which I think is explainable in any way. But to me, what's happening for me spiritually, I think is more important than the physical. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I could but what's happening to you first off physically is just that your body is rebalancing its oxygen level, right? It's realigning of what that is. So interestingly enough, I went to a chiropractor doing that meditation, doing that red light therapy, right? But you go to a chiropractor when your spine is out of alignment in your back. He's like popping your back or doing whatever. And then he realigns you. You're like, wow, yeah, wow, that feels so much better. My shoulders are back. This is happening. Well, this style of breathing is just like that for your breath. It's a realigning of what the breath should be as opposed to what it has been. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, because most
So
people
when
kind
you
of hold their
realign it,
breath, shallow breathing, yeah.
yeah, you're shallow breathing. So, Hunter, I don't know what they say 98.7% of all stats are made up. So I'm just going to make one up. But like a lot of people, I don't know what the number is, but vast majority of people, if if they're all standing up and you have them and you say, take a deep breath in, everybody's shoulder is going to rise. They're going to take a deep breath in. You're going to see their shoulders go up and down. Well, that is breathing through your chest. And that is sympathetic breathing. That's activating your sympathetic system, which means it's going to match your environment. Sympathetic, like a symphony, is matching the
Interesting.
environment. Your parasympathetic system is your restorative system that needs to take you out of fight or flight mode. So I'm not trying to match the environment. I'm just trying to realign and to restore where I've been worn down, so to speak, right? That's parasympathetic system. So, for example, and I use this in the practice, like cats and dogs, mammals will yawn, and that yawning is them activating their parasympathetic system, deactivating fight or flight mode, which is kind of controlling the burn rate of their energy. So they're like, hey, we just killed this animal. We just got some food. We ate. It's time to relax. And so the alpha male lion is going to yawn. And that's a signal to the other members of the pride that they're safe. And so they start yawning and they start yawning. And we're like, yeah, we can relax now. We're safe. We don't have to fight anything or get them food. And then they relax and sleep, right? You do the same thing. Thanksgiving dinner, you eat tryptophan, turkey, you're yawning. Man, I need a nap. Why you're yawning is because your body says, hey, we have everything we need. Now let's go restore. That makes sense?
Got it. Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense.
So physically, that's what's happening in your body, is that this breathing is starting to put your body back into a restorative mode as opposed to in a matching the environment mode. Like, we don't care what the environment's doing. We're just got to restore and lower the burn rate of our energy.
Yeah. And the nice thing about breathwork is that's something we can do anytime, anywhere for free on our own. But you also you lead classes. And Jacqueline, you recently did one of these courses. Is that right?
Yeah, I was at a conference actually with Spring Benson in Utah. And I've told so many people about this experience because I had heard of breathwork. I've actually been to conferences. I was at one in San Diego years ago where they invited everyone to a breathwork session, at 8 a.m. or whatever. I never went to it. And I never probably would have. So the way that this was introduced at this conference was he was just another one of the speakers at the conference. And he came out and he taught a class, essentially. He taught us what breath work is, like he just kind of explained. And what I really liked hearing is Louie studies Greek, and he did this whole breakdown of, using language and just how he explained it all, I guess kind of opened my mind to it. And then next thing you know, they're passing out. Well, I was bawling my eyes out during his talk. And then they were passing out eye masks, and we did kind of like what I would say like a sample size breathwork session right then and there in the conference. And then they invited us to a longer, I guess, full portion, full meal deal the next morning at 7 a.m., which I did go to. But I guess for me in that moment, when I became open to the idea, because I had a better understanding of what it was and that it was just my breath and that alignment process, but also what it did for me spiritually. And I mean, I took my eye mask off after the 7 or 8 minute session, and literally like pools of tears just came out of the eye mask. And I think as business owners, and we have a lot of business owners that listen to this podcast, not all business owners and not all real estate, but as business owners, we're just exposing ourselves a lot of times to a level of stress that the average person is just not exposed to, nor really even has the capacity for. So we have usually really high capacity to handle a lot of stress. And I'm not saying that's healthy, like to be able to handle that much stress on a consistent long-term basis. And I think that just 15-point plan in general has helped me with stress management. But this practice did something for me in 8 minutes, in 1 hour the next day that I hadn't experienced in a long time in my life. And so I say all that because I think we probably have listeners that are listening to this right now that maybe they think, oh, breath work, like that's a bunch of woo-woo, whatever. But it's literally your breath. It's your body, just like walking. Like we're not against walking, right? Using our movement. And so it's just your breath. There's nothing else like that you're exposing yourself to except for your breath. And I don't know, Louie, what you would add to that, but it was just, I can't explain it in 15 minutes nor in 3 minutes, the profound impact that it had on me. And I think you had that same experience. And so what would you add or why does that happen?
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to there's a quote from Bruce Lee, and he says that the usefulness of a cup is its emptiness. So so if you think about what that means, is like, if you wanted a glass of water and the cup already had something in it, it's not useful. You're like, well, I need to find another cup. I need to find it. So when your mind is actually empty, it becomes extraordinarily useful. Like what I would say is what you experienced was you emptied your mind and then you reconnected to your origin, to who you truly are. You're like, this is profound. And you're like, that's right, because your mind's been getting in the way.
Yeah.
And laying on that bed with the doctor, when he's just doing that red light therapy and stuff, like what happened was I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. Can't answer my phone. I was like forced like a little kid, sit in the corner, don't stare at the wall. And I realized like what that did was it forced emptiness. And so what this practice does in a profound way, like, because the sample size that we did for 8 minutes, because that's all it was 8 minutes. And I was actually kind of shocked how many people thought 8 minutes was profound. I'm like, oh, so you came the next morning? Like, no, it was just the 8-minute one. I'm like, the 8-minute one changed your life? Like,
Yes.
It's so true. So, and then kind of what Ryan was saying, physically, that when he asked me the question, physically, that's what your body's going through. And then spiritually, right? I'm not fluent in Greek, but I know it pretty well. And a couple of things that kind of started to make sense to me was this, is that in 18 languages, in Greek though, specifically in Greek and in 17 other languages, the word for breath is spirit. So I want you to think about this, like, and those other 18 languages, and they're massive languages, Arabic, Chinese, so these are languages that have a lot of people that speak it, right? It's not just Greek where it's little. So if you think about what they're saying it's spirit work. Yeah. And I love that what Jacqueline said about, you wouldn't say, some people look at it as voodoo or whatever, you wouldn't say it, or woo-woo or whatever. You're like, it's like walking. And it's true. It's like walking. This is a perfect way to explain it. Are you against walking? Like, because it's just you're breathing. And so, but anciently, and you go back to the original origin of these words, the word for, again, for spirit is breath. So if you think about all the contexts where you've heard the word spirit, right? We say this all the time. You need to breathe life back into that thing in your life. You need to take a breath and reconsider. You need to connect to your spirit and reconsider. You need to put the spirit of that back into it, right? The spirit of that. So we're saying this. So we're saying that thing is lifeless, and now you need to put a spirit in it. So it becomes a life, right? And for me, that's how I see it, is that I have a spirit in this body, in this thing that's a physical thing. I have a spirit that when the spirit is in it, this physical thing comes alive, right? So then the word inspired in Greek means God's breath.
Hmm.
So every practice, a breath work that I hold, a weekly practice, I'll say, raise your hand if you feel inspired to do something. 100% everybody raises their hand. I said, so then I say, so you have God's breath.
Wow.
That's why you want to do something new. That's kind of scary. That doesn't make sense because God's ways aren't your ways. And that's why you're like, I don't know if I should do this, but I feel so inspired. I'm like, of course, because God is inspiring you. Like the founding fathers of our country, that seemed crazy to what they were doing, signing a contract with a death, with putting their life on the line for what they provided for America. Like that was inspired. Nobody's going to do that just because it's a good idea.
I wonder how much of that inspiration comes from now us having the space. We get going so fast, we get going and doing so much as high performing business owners that we have these massive breakthroughs in 8 minutes, Louie, like 8 minutes, because we're just going, we don't stop. And in just a couple of minutes, like now we've cleared space and that inspiration can come to us. Is that what's going on?
That's a perfect way to explain that, right? It's like you've built this muscle, you've been building this, but you never play the game. You never get on the court. You're like, but you have all this talent, all this ability, and you never get on the court. You got to get on the court. So, and how you get on the court is by emptying the mind, right?
Yeah. So taking that time.
That's why people I've had countless people say this to me. This literally will change the rest of my life. This literally is going to change my business. And it has changed your business. It changed my business. It radically, it accelerated my business. It changed my life. If you ask my wife, what ultimately saved your marriage or what ultimately made your marriage work? She's like, breath work. She's like, ultimately, it all originated from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and Louie, I did a little research on you before we jumped on this call, and I came across a quote that I think will really tie all of this in together. You said one of the fruits of breathwork is authenticity, and without it, you're lost, and with it, you don't need direction. I just Googled your name, and I don't know if you said that, but I was impacted by that. That authenticity, and like with breathwork, it gives us direction because we now have that space.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. And to me, that's what it did. It allowed me to be authentic and to say the things I've always wanted to say and not have to worry about it and say, this is how it goes. And then that authenticity attracted people to me. Said, oh, you're the person I want to work with now. Like, I know that. You're the person that I need to ask this question to. And because that's what I believe. Like, we're here as a family, right? Around the world, we're here as a family. And we're here to help everybody. And it's remarkable the help that we can receive when people are actually truly authentic, not saying they are, living it soulfully.
Yeah. Louie, I know that a lot of people are going to hear this podcast and they're going to wonder, how can I connect with Louie? How can I learn more about breathwork? If they wanted to connect with you and they're in your area and wanted to participate with you, how can they find you online?
I'm building a website at this point, but at this point, I would say just Facebook, Instagram, just look me up.
Facebook, Instagram, Louie Hamner, that's LouieHamner, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Got it. Jacqueline,
Well, I know, Louie, you have a studio in Utah, so they could reach out to you, and you teach classes at your studio.
Yeah.
And I know that I have a mission to bring Louie out to the Pacific Northwest. We've been trying to get our schedules together, but I definitely want to invite you out to come into the Portland, Vancouver, Southwest Washington area. So if anyone is listening to this and you're in our area or would want to travel to our area, if Louie did come out here, when he comes out here, let me know, send me a DM, and I'll keep you on my invite list for that event, because I definitely will be doing that this year at some point in the next few months. So thank you, Louie, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Louie.
Yeah, we could talk about this for hours. So hopefully this was a good enough sample to get some people to open their minds to it and have some interest in it. And I know that there's more to come. So we're excited.
I'm looking forward to having you out this way, Louie. And thank you all of our listeners, as always, for listening. Make sure to check windmakegive.com, 15-Point Plan Podcast. Hit that like button, that subscribe button, and share this with your friends and family, because I know they're going to love what Louie had to say with us. Louie, thank you again for joining us today. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.